Hello, and good afternoon, and welcome everyone. It's nice to see all these wonderful faces on a nice, sunny, warm afternoon. The weather is blessing us, so that's good. I am Raka Shom, Professor and Harron Family Chair in the Department of Communication, and I will be the moderator for today's event featuring Professor Simone Browne from University of Texas, Austin, who I will have the pleasure of introducing shortly. So this event, as you know, is titled Transit Talks, and Transit Talks is an annual event that is organized and sponsored by the Waterhouse Family Institute in the Department of Communication here at Villanova, and in partnership with the Klein School of Communication at Temple University. And most recently, we are delighted that the Annenberg School of Communication at UPenn has also joined this partnership. So thank you to both our partners. Each year, Transit Talks brings in well-known scholars in the interdisciplinary field of communication and media studies whose work focuses on social justice, and which is very aligned with the mission and the commitment of our university here at Villanova. That's very integral to who we are. So the individual gives a lecture, the speaker gives a lecture here at Villanova University, and then offers a master class at one of our partnering universities the following day. And this time, the master class will be at the Annenberg School at UPenn, and it is tomorrow. It's a master class with graduate students primarily, but I don't think anybody would mind if faculty stopped by. So it is tomorrow at 11 a.m. at the Annenberg School. If anyone is interested, please contact us for more details later. Before I say anything else, I want to recognize the man behind this event, Professor Hezi Lewis, the director of Waterhouse Family Institute, who has worked extremely hard putting this event together, and his wonderful assistant, Wendy Eisenberg. Wendy and Hezi, please stand. Thank you so much for everything that you did for this event. So we have speakers who will say a few words. So I now want to invite Adele Lindenmeyer, the Dean of College of Arts and Sciences here at Villanova, to make a few comments.
Thank you, Raka, and welcome to everyone. It's a great pleasure to see you here, students, staff, faculty, visitors, colleagues from Temple and the University of Pennsylvania, and a special honor to welcome you, the deans from the Klein School and the Annenberg School. It's really very, very nice to have you here, and it's an excellent omen of a stronger partnership to come. So I'm in my 11th year as Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. We like in the college to think of ourselves as the intellectual heart of Villanova University, not least because every single undergraduate takes many courses in our college which are distinctive and fundamental to a Villanova undergraduate education. Our education is unashamedly rooted in the liberal arts, and we prepare our students to become critical thinkers, strong communicators, and ethical leaders. We know our students as young people who really are committed to making a difference, which is reflected also in the university's mission and the mission of the Waterhouse Family Institute for the Study of Communication and Society. WFI, as we call it fondly, was founded in 2010 with an extraordinarily generous gift from Lawrence M. Waterhouse Jr., who graduated from Villanova in 1959 A time, by the way, when it was an all-male school, many of the students commuters, very, very different from the university as we know it today. The Institute supports a wide variety of student internships, including unique internships at the Vatican and in Rome at the UN. It also supports our very successful social justice documentary program led by the incomparable Professor Lewis, whose student-produced films have won awards and also give students an opportunity to travel the world and discover places and people they had never imagined before. The Institute is equally supportive of communication research by scholars, with a grant program that has awarded more than $750,000 in grants to scholars all over the world since the establishment of the Institute. And of course, the Institute partners with other institutions and scholars for lectures and symposia like the Transit Talks and the one we are going to hear today. I am especially pleased to welcome Dr. Simone Browne from the University of Texas at Austin. And I know we are all eager to hear from her, but you have to wait just a moment. I need to say a few words about our guest deans here. Dean Fabienne Darling-Wolfe is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies at the Lou Klein College of Media and Communication at Temple University. Her research focuses on global media flows and processes of transnational cultural influence and their intersection with dynamics of gender, class, race, and ethnicity. At Temple, she teaches a variety of courses, including gender in the American media, journalism and globalization, media and globalization, and qualitative research methods. And I had an introduction for you, but I seem to have missed it. So I would like you to introduce. Yes.
I am Sarah Renee Weiser. I am the Walter H. Annenberg Dean of the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania and the Lauren Berlant Professor of Communication, also at UPenn. And my work involves issues of race, gender, and representation in the media. And I'm just really, really happy to be partnering with this group, and especially happy to be here with Dr. Simone Browne, whose work has made a great impact on me and many of my students. And so, yeah, that's it.
So now it's my pleasure to, I think the next on the program is to invite you, Dean Darling-Wolfe, to the podium to talk a bit about the Transit Talks.
Thank you, Adele.
Thank you. I'll be very brief because Raka said everything that I was going to say already. So she just kind of took words out of my mouth, almost literally. Well, as Raka mentioned, the Transit Talks started as a collaboration between the Villanova's Waterhouse Family Institute and Temple University's Lou Klein College of Media and Communication, where the collaboration is in its 7th year. We started doing this in 2018. I believe there was a couple years there during the COVID pandemic when we did not do this in person. And on the Temple side, it was started by the former Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies, Dr. Patrick Murphy, who thought, hey, there's a train that goes between our two campuses, so maybe we could take use of that and send people on SEPTA to each other's campus. I'm not sure that that part has, fully worked out. How many of you actually took the train today? Okay, so we do have it, perhaps we can ask SEPTA if they're interested in sponsoring next year. But certainly, aside from the pleasure to welcome a wide variety of speakers and in both, as Raka mentioned, typically a Thursday evening program in the form of a more formal lecture, and then a master class on Friday geared towards doctoral students, but of course where everyone else is invited to join. And over the years, we've engaged in very exciting and enriching conversations. And the side effect of that, which was part of the goal when we started this collaboration, was to increase the interactions between our, at the time, 2 campuses and among our graduate students, but also our faculty. So we're hoping that we can continue to enrich our collaborations and allow for more exchange between our various institutions. The speakers are typically oriented towards issues of social change, social justice, which are all areas that are really central to what we do at Temple and at Villanova, and now, of course, as well at Penn. And we're very excited indeed this year to welcome a new partner, the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania, with whom we already have multiple types of exchanges. So it's kind of nice to start this three-way exchange among our 3 institutions. And again, as Raka mentioned, tomorrow the masterclass will take place at the Annenberg School. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for that as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah for a little bit of reflection about what we're thinking about doing in the future with this collaboration.
Thank you, Fab.
Thanks, Fab. Sorry, I'll mix up your. Hi, everyone. When we were kind of organizing this evening, we thought that Fab would talk about the past and the kind of the origin of the transit talks, and I would talk about the future of the transit talks, or what we were imagining to be the future of the transit talks. As Fab said, last year I actually was the person who gave this lecture, and thought that it would be amazing to partner with Villanova and Temple, and to think about how we can have more connections and intersections between the 3 schools, and hopefully more in the future, and kind of really establish a sense of the urgency and importance of communication and media scholarship in the broader Philadelphia area. There's so many people here who are doing incredible work, and for us to not be in conversation with each other seemed to be just a huge missed opportunity. So I thought it would be really great if Annenberg could be part of this partnership, and so kind of asked if I could join the cool kids and the club, and they said yes. So it's really to collaborate with everyone here has been a great privilege. So thinking about the future of transit talks has been interesting for me, given the time that has passed between when we decided that Fab was going to talk about the origins and I was going to talk about the transit talks. I mean, the transit talks are incredibly important. They focus on the importance of communication and media. They focus on translation and crossing borders. They focus on social change and social justice among not just the collaborating campus communities, but around the world, right? Around in our field. And that's all still true, and that's all really important. But we are in a different moment now than we were when I thought about, I can give a brief 2-minute talk about the future, right? The world seemed full of different sorts of possibilities a couple months ago. We're at, as we all know, an incredibly urgent and anxiety-producing and, in many ways terrifying time, not just for the structure of higher education, obviously, but for the structure of the world and the ways in which we can inhabit this world in particular ways. But also, we're at a really urgent moment about the possibility of scholarship at all, because scholarship, especially scholarship that focuses on marginalized groups, on social change, on social justice, on underrepresentation, on dynamics of power. From so many different angles, it feels like we're experiencing threats to these groups and to our study of them and to our freedom, including threats to the freedom of knowledge. Collaborations, that was the dark part. Now I'm going to get to the happy part, right? Because otherwise that would just be not a very good introduction. Collaborations like this one between Villanova and Temple and the Annenberg School at Penn, they really do help us navigate this world, right? They remind us of the importance of scholarship on social change and social justice. Collaboration among scholars and among scholarship reminds us that we are better when we collaborate and we build coalition together, that we're not in this as individuals or as individual schools. We are in this as a group of interconnected scholars and institutions and students and staff and all of it, right? So this is where I see the future of the transit talks going, towards the beauty and the elegance and the urgency of coalition politics and shared scholarship. And so I'm so thrilled that Annenberg is now part of this partnership. It gives me such pleasure that our first, talk as partners in this transit talk is with Dr. Simone Browne. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can all do together, starting with tonight. So thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So now I have the distinct pleasure, honor to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Simone Browne, whose work not only I have admired, but so many of us have admired and have learned from. Her work is absolutely amazing. So Simone Browne is Associate Professor in the Department of African and African Diaspora Studies and the Director of the Center for Women and Gender Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. She is also co-director of the book series Errant Trees with, I hope I said that correctly, with Duke University Press. Simone teaches and researches surveillance studies and Black diaspora studies, and her work has been featured in various outlets such as The Wired, Jewish Currents, and other venues. In Simone's first book, and I might add, wonderful book, Dark Matters, on the surveillance of Blackness, which has been so impactful, she turned to the archive of transoceanic slavery to understand how its histories of surveillance inform our contemporary moment. So it's a book that wonderfully traces the genealogy of surveillance in terms of the Black body. Decentering studies that focus solely on post-9/11 surveillance and new technologies, such as automated facial recognition, the Pegasus spyware, hidden air tags that can track people and property, Ring video doorbells, I think she will talk about that today a little bit, and voice-controlled digital assistants like Alexa and Siri. She has studied the slave ship and plantation management, the racial appetite of Jim Crow, branding and lantern laws that evidence a long history of surveilling Blackness. As well, Dark Matters focuses on the inventive ways fugitives, outlaws, abolitionists, and their accomplices worked to undermine the technologies of slavery and its afterlife. We are still living that afterlife. Of course, that is not the entire story of slavery, but it's certainly a very important one that has not been addressed. Professor Browne is currently writing her second book, Art on Surveillance, which attends to the interventions made by artists and creative technologists whose works grapple with surveillance, from predictive policing, a very reified contemporary practice, home security and workplace monitoring, to the FBI's counterintelligence program and artificial intelligence. Through archival research, interviews, interdisciplinary analytical work, this book investigates the ways that artists employ strategies of invention, disruption, refusal, and care. I love that. When it comes to troubling surveillance and its methodologies. Together, the essays and interviews in the book explore the productive possibilities of rebellious methodologies, which we seem to really need in our times, and creative innovation when it comes to troubling surveillance and its various tactics, and imagining Black life beyond the surveillance state. So this is such a powerful topic on which I think Simone will speak today, and especially becomes relevant to the horrific authoritarian times in which we are living, in which students, DEI, any expressions of race, pro-Palestine advocacy is being surveilled by the government, and we know that there are algorithms that pick up words from social media accounts to render so many people as inconvenient subjects. So Simone's talk today is entitled On Doorbells, MTurks and Algorithmic Landscapes. I want to mention that there will be a book signing at the end of this event, so if you're interested, please stay back. We hope that you will. Now, please join me in welcoming Simone Browne.
Is this your?
Is one bottle enough?
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm introduction. I really appreciate all of you. It's a pleasure to join you here at Villanova University as part of this year's Waterhouse Family Institute's Transit Talk. And now that I know it comes from a mode of transportation and connection and collaboration on the train, which is public transportation is very important. A special thank you to Professor Hezi Lewis and to Dean Sarah Benet-Weiser for their invitation. And my appreciation goes as well to Wendy Eisenberg, Jessica Rodriguez, and Dinesh Subjali for organizing the details of my visit. A special thank you to everyone that I met on my way here for the warm welcome, including Raka, Tom, Gord, my long-term Twitter, now Blue Sky Mutual, DJ Ripley, Jenny, Shannon. So thank you so much. And as well, a special thank you to the Annenberg School of Communication, as well as the Klein School at Temple University, and to you all as well for coming here this afternoon, on this beautiful afternoon, for a discussion of doorbells, MTurks, and algorithmic landscapes. Okay, so let's go. Around 3 years ago, there was a story outside of Austin, that came out of Austin, Texas, where I live, about a busybody couple who had tasked themselves with doing something about the series of packages that were being stolen, I guess, or taken allegedly from their doorsteps and the doorsteps of others in their South Austin neighborhood. With reconnaissance that they did through doorbell cameras and neighborhood watch apps, they set their sights on a group of masked people driving around in an SUV without any license plates. The couple's revenge took the form of loading up their child's dirty diapers in a box and making that box look like a recent delivery. They left the box out on their front porch, and their marks took the bait. only then to return a little bit later to smear the entirety of that box contents onto the couple's front door. So things escalated from there, and the masked people in the SUV came back again, and this time they came back with a larger box of cow manure that they then proceeded to smear on the couple's front porch and on their car. It was a really long day of cleaning up a lot of cow feces, the not quite ingenious couple told the press. So I tell this story of diapers, dung, and doorbell cameras as an entry into my discussion of labor and extraction, and as a consideration of the ways that platforms and carceral data collection technologies work to consolidate state, policing, and corporate powers. I tell this story also as an entry into some of my curiosities when it comes to the company that is known as Amazon.com. Towards the end of my talk, I'll turn to some arts, innovation, and creative technologists. So Texas is one of over now a dozen states that have recently introduced deterrence initiatives and laws regarding package theft, or what has come to be known as porch piracy. One example is Round Rock, Texas, just a bit north of Austin. Their police department has something called Operation Front Porch. And so this is a program where you can sign up to have your packages shipped to a police station for later pickup. Or another example from Texas is the penal code change 3120, which came into effect about 4 years ago and moved the penalty for mail theft from a citation to possibly a Class C misdemeanor or to a Class A misdemeanor punishable by up to a year incarceration, all the way up to a third-degree felony that could be punishable by 10 years of imprisonment. Pennsylvania's Governor Shapiro signed a similar Senate bill into law last year. So at the federal level, there was the Porch Piracy Act of 2022. What's time nowadays? Pandemic time. Was introduced by Congress to amend Title 18 of the United States Code. So this act, if it were to have been passed, would have extended the same federal protections as offered to the U.S. Postal Service, to extend that to private and commercial interstate carriers like UPS, FedEx, who deliver residential e-commerce deliveries for spaces like Amazon or Target. A recent article in the Houston Law Review found that there isn't much evidence that these types of laws lead to their desired deterrent effect. Instead, they enact really criminal statutes that bolster public prosecutions for essentially what are, private problems between sometimes neighbors and people who drive around in unmarked SUVs. So along with these laws, penalties, and increased criminalization, there's the ever-present proliferation of the retail of home monitoring systems for the consumer market. These are the video doorbells and indoor cameras that are once a profitable source of entertainment and neighborhood melodramas, but they're also carceral data collection technologies like Amazon Ring surveillance hardware and its accompanying neighborhood app, or Google's Nest smart home system. With these carceral data collection technologies, users can fashion themselves as local crime reporters, fill out incident reports, and allow location tracking on these apps in order to provide live, fear-insisting updates on the user's surrounding vicinity. I say that these technologies are a profitable form of entertainment because not only is it the trafficking of camera doorbell footage on mobile apps like Neighbors, Citizen, and Nextdoor, but they also make their way onto TikTok, Facebook, and also the subreddit Caught on Ring. But also in 2002, MGM Television announced that Ring footage would be repackaged into an unscripted reality television show with host Wanda Sykes. So Wanda Sykes is a well-known comedian and also a former NSA contracting specialist. So the show Ring Nation now airs on YouTube, and it was produced by Big Fish Entertainment. This is the same company that produced Alive PD, which saw its cancellation in the summer of 2020 in response to the George Floyd uprisings, only to then be repackaged and reinvented a couple years later into On Patrol Live. So MGM Television is owned by Amazon. As we know, reality television shows offer us a voyeuristic, mass-mediated, while cheaply produced form of entertainment. But by packaging surveillance as entertainment, the reality TV television genre is one way, at least for us, the viewing public, the idea of perpetual camera surveillance is normalized and also sold to us as something to be thought of as perhaps rewarding or pleasurable. It's what sociologist Christian Parenti calls the soft selling of surveillance. So whether doing the watching or being watched, reality television is a means by which consent is gained for even further surveillance. And the police ride-along genre, one of the most popular genres in particular, with its repertoire of propaganda tactics, jump cuts, grainy footage, night vision, all those things, is one way in which police authority is normalized, as this genre of programming works to frame policing as benign, normalized for some, inevitable for many, and as a necessity for our times, and as entertainment. So now reality television is filmed at our doorsteps and on our phones and on our driveways. This is what Ruth Wilson Gilmore, in another but similar context, calls dangerously available technologies. These dangerously available technologies are the excess of audio and video recordings that take place, often non-consensually, of people on the job or just passing by someone's front door or wherever the camera's purview is. So this is not just propaganda as mainstream entertainment. It's concerning given Amazon's partnerships with policing agencies, or when users of these particular devices, such as the Neighborhood app, receive in-app notifications and alerts when police make requests for their videos. Later in this app's rollout, Amazon introduced an opt-in end-to-end encryption feature for the Ring video footage, but this meant only if a user chooses to opt into this video encryption feature, would their Ring footage be excluded from video sharing requests from the police. And you also have to think about not only Ring, but the way that we talked about Tesla stock going down, but the ways that that particular vehicles are almost recording 24/7, and how requests are made for police and insurance companies for their footage as well too. And so further to that, in spring of 2022, Amazon internally promoted a new director of global learning. This person was previously a leader in that company's global securities division and loss prevention. But the interesting about this person and the connections that can be made with these kinds of carceral technologies is that according to her now password-protected LinkedIn page, sometime before joining Amazon, she was the Quality Assurance Manager for Corrections Corp of America. So that company previously went by the name CoreCivic, and it's one of this country's largest owners and operators of prisons, jails, and immigrant detention centers. So these types of partnerships and convergences between policing and consumers, mediated by data collection platforms, could become even more troubling as of right now, but by invitation only. Amazon is selling the Always Home Cam, and there's an image of it on the left there. This is a flying indoor camera where users can customize its flight path, recording the interior of their homes. It's a drone, and this drone, along with sensors and an Alexa-enabled technology, can also be purchased with what looks like a dog to me, but it's not. It's called Alexa, the household robot. And they're part of a network of devices like smart locks, and Alexa-enabled mailbox sensors, Ring cameras for cars, and the accompanying apps that anyone with access to a smartphone can choose to participate in. They form what could be called algorithmic landscapes. So algorithmic landscapes mark the transformation in that digital platforms, just-in-time distribution, unlimited 2-day shipping, as well as gig work and click work, and sharing economies like Airbnb and other ride shares. When it comes to the logistical, economic, and social impacts on the environment, whether that's the built environment, geographical configurations, or otherwise. Sometimes these algorithmic landscapes come right to the front door. So I want to turn to another landscape for a moment, and perhaps this is not an algorithmic one, but perhaps an analog one, that of Queens, New York in 1969. And so this is one thing that didn't make it into my first book, but it's a discussion of a patent issued in 1969 to Mary Van Britten Browne and her husband Albert Browne. And it's for an audiovisual alarm system for household protection. So it was designed to include a video scanning device at the entrance of the home, an intercom, alarms, audio recording capabilities, a front door video scanner, and even a bolt that could be unlocked by means of, I guess, radio waves, remote control lock. And so this closed circuit television is obviously a precursor to contemporary remote home monitoring systems for the consumer market, like video doorbells. So Mary Van Britten Browne was a nurse by profession, and at the time I wanted to imagine that she came up with this idea with other colleagues and nurses who worked the night shift and who were frustrated with the lack of police response. That they thought they wanted to come up with this technology collaboratively as a self-defense strategy, or another option instead of calling the cops, just maybe. So it seemed to me at the time that there was a certain absenting of her invention from the official genealogy of surveillance technology, sort of like the generalized absenting of Black women's contributions when it comes to the ways in which surveillance is conceptualized and historicized. So I wondered what, in any way, out of this, knowing that this relationship between our knowledge about security and surveillance and its infrastructures could be altered by remembering that there was a time in the late 1960s when a Black woman from Queens, New York had a patented role in the development of closed-circuit television. So I've presented this image on the left quite a few times since 2015. By situating this image and the development of this patent as a way to think about citational practices, or the absenting when it comes to the way that Black feminist theorizing was situated within surveillance studies, and how it's historicized, and how Black feminist theorizing can help us to grapple with the very methodologies of surveillance. However, Mary Van Britten Browne's 1969 patent was recently referenced in a patent granted to Amazon Technologies for a USB audiovisual doorbell dongle, one that could be portable so you can take your Ring camera with you. So while I once might have tried to see her invention as a response to a legitimate fear of racist police violence, or as an early version of what digital studies scholar Lisa Nakamura has termed anti-carceral data collection, to see this Black woman's invention now be cited by Amazon points to the ways that even if it was such an effort towards something that could look like abolition, how easily it can become incorporated into the genealogy of Ring surveillance hardware and other carceral technologies. So a report released by Data in Society titled "At the Digital Doorstep" found that the recording and sharing of digital doorbell videos of delivery workers filmed while on the job amounts to what the authors of that report called a boss behavior. And that while these videos might capture humorous and feel-good moments like the kind that might be on that Wanda Sykes show, that Wanda Sykes, who worked for the NSA, that might actually only be funny or indeed feel good to the unknown spectators recording, watching, and sharing these videos. They are most often captured and shared non-consensually. And so it's a question of consent if you're in public space or you're doing your job, that you are already on those cameras or those recordings. And they're often used in punitive ways to monitor, supervise, and instruct package delivery drivers. In this way, the retailer's workplace supervision, that retailer being perhaps Amazon, the workplace supervision of their employees is then outsourced to the very consumers and customers of who consume these products. So delivery drivers and other app-based gig workers are a category of laborers that are mostly racialized and working class, and that can be defined by precarity and quantification by control. This quantification by control will include things like GPS monitoring, time task completion, and the customer's app-mediated rating systems that it gets fashioned as feedback and compliments, such as did they follow instructions, were they friendly, and were they respectful of the property. This becomes a surplus of data, and a surplus of data that's extracted from the laborers and from consumers that's then repurposed to refine algorithmic management schemes. So with the pandemic crises of lockdowns, layoffs, and work from home, and as Ruth Wilson Gilmore, got it right this time, tells us, quote, high employment is an indication that capital has reorganized. For example, through labor-saving technology, where capital is still there, value is still produced, but less value circulates as wages. So with the expanding category of essential workers, whose work is treated as automation and controlled by thumbs up, thumbs down, starred ratings, tips, and other quantifications, we know that Amazon's Ring network cannot be delinked from that company's union busting and poor records when it comes to health and safety. In fact, there was a report titled Primed for Pain, Amazon's Epidemic of Workplace Injuries, which was released in 2021 by the Strategic Organizing Center, which is a democratic coalition of 4 labor unions representing over 4 million workers. Some of the report's findings included the fact that workers at Amazon fulfillment centers are injured more frequently and more severely than workers at non-Amazon warehouses. So compared to Walmart, which is Amazon's largest retail competitor, the rates of on-the-job injury is more than double. What struck me from this report, it's available online, are the responses from our Amazon workers to the statement, to keep me safe at work, Amazon should. So to keep me safe at work, Amazon should understand that we are humans and not robots. Look at the people who form your teams as individuals with different strengths and ambitions, instead of an army of faceless numbers to manipulate into improving your metrics. Another worker said, Amazon should be more understanding about rate of delivery of packages and not reprimand you when you are not delivering fast enough. Coincidentally, this Prime for Pain report came out around the same time as Amazon introduced their Amazon wellness box. So this was like a wellness cage or a chamber. So the company said about this particular cage, during shifts, employees can visit Amazon stations and watch short videos featuring easy to follow well-being activities, including guided meditations, positive affirmations, and calming scenes with sounds. I'll play you a little bit so you can see what it looks like.
I wanted to provide a place that's quiet that people could go and focus on their mental and emotional well-being. The Zen booth is an interactive kiosk where
you can navigate through a library of mental health and mindful practices
to recharge that internal battery.
So recharging one's internal battery. So the tweet announcing this wellness cage and the video were quickly removed after it was, pilloried on that app there. But the Amazon wellness box or cage is part of their Work Well program, which was introduced in 2020. And as a report out of Vice told it, a pamphlet was distributed to workers at Amazon's Tulsa warehouse, which described the workers to understand themselves as industrial athletes who should prepare themselves for work accordingly, training as the industrial athletes that there were. Are. So there was another box or booth or cage that Amazon had patented in 2013. This is it below here. And this was a human transport device, a device that would allow workers to move unhindered on the warehouse floor. So these fulfillment warehouses and distribution centers are often located in low-income communities where there's often a geographical disconnect found between these communities and the ones with the higher rates or highest rates of online shopping. A 2021 report by the University of the Redlands and the People's Collective for Justice found that in California, this led to a disproportionate amount of toxic exposure, dust, fine particle pollutants, nitrogen oxide emissions from diesel trucks, things like arsenic, benzene, formaldehyde, and nickel that it contains. These things penetrate the lungs, damage your lung tissue, could lead to asthma and other vascular and respiratory health effects. So this is the outcome of breathing in and out these algorithmic landscapes. Landscapes of exhaust, of just-in-time distribution, and the exhaust of overnight product delivery. It's deadly. So right now, one must wonder how much of our knowing about the health effects that have been stalled by Elon Musk's Doge, or whatever he's calling it, by way of the firing of federal workers and cuts to the collection and sharing of the data by federal agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency. So in her essay, Notes Towards Sealing Forensic Landscapes, poet and writer M. Phillips tells us that, quote, "We in the Americas live in forensic landscapes, and that we also inhabit the scene of the crime, where evidence is erased and destroyed." In this essay, Philip recalls the time when she first visited Africa, where she carried with her a metal seal embosser that she would often use when she was a practicing attorney to seal affidavits and other documents. She writes that, "I carried this machine with me because I wanted to prove that something had happened, that my ancestor had been kidnapped and sold away from this continent I was about to visit." So I think of M. Phillips' words when I look back at some of the images that I took when I traveled to Ablabloche in Accra, Ghana. Particularly when Phillips writes, "The undersea cables, the mining projects, and that exploit people, the sweatshops, employing low-wage workers, all creating this algorithmic landscape. That is, too, is a forensic landscape of sort." And so you also, was it a few years ago, they started doing, not they, by they I mean Google, started something called Equiano, which is the undersea cables for the internet communications that would, surround the continent of Africa. Facebook was going to name theirs Simba, like the Lion King, but they changed it to something else afterwards. Perhaps there was pushback. I think it's called maybe Africa 2, I'm not too sure. But Ablabloche is part of these algorithmic landscapes. So when I first visited, I was interested in the work of self-taught computer engineers and makers who were creatively repairing and building from the secondhand consumer electronic equipment. Ablabloche is part market, part electronic waste site. It's home to schools, other businesses, residential areas with a population at the time of about 50,000 people, many internally displaced for many decades within Ghana. It is thought by some to be more toxic than Chernobyl. So one of the questions that frame my interest in the problem of electronic waste is the one that's on the top of the screen. What happens when Alexa goes to Accra? This is to say that there could be no big data, artificial intelligence, Ring doorbells, machine learning, or voice-controlled digital assistants like Alexa and Siri without the materials that make up its infrastructure. So you can think here of Kate Crawford and Vladin Joler's Anatomy of AI systems that maps the life cycle of an Amazon Echo, and their other works that these two have collaborated on. And they do that, they map the life cycle of the Amazon Echo through the lens of extraction, whether that is labor extraction, data extraction, or the extraction of our planetary resources. So taking the infrastructure of cloud computing, biometrics, smart cities, machine intelligence, surveillance hardware, and the processing and storage that these things entail as a starting point, particularly when much of the cloud servers or the attendant data storage equipment that accompany these technologies are said to have an average lifespan of only a few years. What happens when this technology becomes obsolete but not useless? This is especially important to me when we think of electronic debris, slop, and garbage that remakes these technologies. Offering up recycled newness, it's often done through the work of unseen Black laborers and working class laborers. I mentioned slop here to signal the term for ChatGPT's generated art, news, and writing that is said to be, very low quality. That's often made off of theft of intellectual property and art, and some of our own writings as well too, as the outcome of the earlier contractual work that's done by or had been done by Black content moderators and data laborers in Nairobi, Kenya, who were subjected to psychological trauma and damage from the texts and the images that they reviewed. So we have to situate questions of accountability and our own complicity when it comes to the health effects of the people that do data laboring, content monitoring, as well as the loosely regulated or unregulated waste work when it comes to dismantling, sorting, dealing in scraps, burning, and sometimes repairing electronics like the laptops and that are the games consoles, the cell phones that are often unable to be repaired now, and that they have a certain amount of planned obsolescence with them. Waste here from the secondhand consumer and electronics equipment market is imported to sites not only in Africa but China and elsewhere at the end of life stage or the near end of life stage from places like Europe, the UK, and the US. While some of these end-of-life products can be repaired, many of the people that I spoke to there found that they could no longer repair them as effectively as they could in previous years, and they're often just recycled for other materials like copper, aluminum, rare earth minerals that are made raw and new once again, then to be exported for other devices. So cell phones, televisions, small and large household appliances like microwaves, TV, and motorcycle parts are all part of this recycled electronics market. You can see that the dealing comes in the weighing of these items, but also in the dismantling of them too. A U.S. government accountability report released in 2020 found that cell phones contain more precious metals by weight than raw ore, and claimed that 1 million recycled cell phones can be rendered into a little over 35,000 pounds of copper, 770 pounds of silver, and 75 pounds of gold. And so the outcome of these types of waste work include toxic exposure to elements such as lead and mercury, plastics and copper, soil and food contamination and drinking water contamination and pollution, but also contamination to the livestock supply. So when I went there, it was just a backup already. As many researchers do, they often roll up in places where they don't belong. I had made connections with a group of researchers that were already embedded with some other teams that were doing work with the workers that were doing the waste work, and they were doing a long-term study of the health effects. And it's important to say that even within the researchers from the University of Ghana, they did not even, still did not speak the language of the folks that were doing this type of work. And so long-term connections had to be made with other agencies that were working directly with the workers. And so that is how I was able to get in contact with that team. This is not to say that there are at the time quite a lot of researchers that were there taking films and that had just kind of showed up in a kind of seeing that space as like a site of something freaky, well as maybe not necessarily thinking how our own practices of lack of repair and consumerism and whatnot allow for something like this. And it's also to say that we also have electronic waste sites here in the US that also need their own investigation. But when these circuit boards are dismantled by hammers and wires pulled apart by hand, like in the panel over there, you can see what are basically atomized computer parts, like the glass screens, the dust clouds, the acrylic resin all around. And so maybe about 500 meters, maybe away from where I was mainly, you can see, and this is the space over there. This is the really acrid air that you could still inhale and smell from the burning of high-impact thermoplastics. So I couldn't help but think about respiration, about the ways that these atomized computer parts get incorporated into the human body, about the labored type of breathing that the dismantling process does. I think of what Frantz Fanon in A Dying Colonialism, had termed termed combat breathing. It was actually in Wretched of the Earth, sorry. A breathing in response to colonial occupation, a breathing in and out of algorithmic landscapes and its waste. This is an occupied breathing that is really a bodily contestation of state violence, of garbage imperialism, of disregard, through this violent arrangement that we have of disposal of waste. Of course, there are other means by which these nearly non-functional electronics could be recycled and disposed of. We can encourage invention when it comes to innovations in recycling, the use of effective microorganisms, the process of dissolving electronic waste through bacteria, and also robotic means of disassembly, or by just being mindful of the ways in which we consume and how we repair. So when we think of labor rights of waste workers, this is around, a $5 a day job. We have to think about also reparations and what is owed. Any examination of the occupational and health and safety effects associated with exposure to these secondhand consumer electronics during the dismantling process has to, really consider the colonial underpinnings of this aspect of the supply chains and contextualize this within a legacy of contemporary manifestations of imperialisms and inequalities associated with global capitalism. So when I returned to Ghana I was planning on returning this year, but you never know with everything that's going on in our country now, that might be stalled when it comes to who can cross the border and return, in one piece, I guess. Or even asking that same question about the secondhand consumer electronics market here in the US, my question might be inspired by what journalist and sometimes best friend of Oprah Winfrey, Gayle King, said last week after her 11-minute journey allegedly to space on board Jeff Bezos' Blue Origins rocket. King told another reporter. Have y'all been to space? And I'll just play a little bit of her there for some of you that might have missed it.
Bothers me, because I've certainly read some of the things online, coming from people that I know, that I like, that I consider friends. And this is what I would say to that. Space is not an either or, it's a both and because you do something in space, doesn't mean you're taking anything away from Earth. And what you're doing in space is trying to make things better here on Earth. What Blue Origin wants to do is take the waste here and figure out a way to put it in space to make our planet cleaner. Jeff Bezos has so many ideas, and the people that are working there are really devoted and dedicated to making our planet a better place. That's number one. Number two, have you been? If you've been and you still feel that way after you come back, please let's have a conversation. Number three, please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes out, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. You know, we duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride. It was called a flight. It was called a journey, because a ride implies that it's something frivolous or something that's lighthearted. There was nothing frivolous about what we did, and the machine that we were on, and what it took for the people to get that machine up and running, get us up and get us back down safely. So, you know, I'm very disappointed and very saddened by it. And I also say this, what it's doing to inspire other women and young girls, please don't ignore that. I've had so many women and young girls reach out to me, and men too, by the way, men too.
I'll stop it there. And every time I watch it, there's more and more that is just because the ways in which a certain type of feminism is being co-opted and also narrated by her. It seems that she's under duress from the Blue Origins folks when doing this. And from the videos I've seen of the landing, and Katy Perry was singing at the time, and when Jeff Bezos came to open the door, which was already opened, it's just that's why I say they allegedly, you know, but she insists that we refer to her as an astronaut now. But this idea of where our waste collectively can go, it says something about that Bezos's ideas around space expansion still are about colonial expansion and a disregard for questions of our own, you know, commitment to this planet. But for now on Earth, I want to turn to the work of artist Danielle Dean for the insightful ways in which she troubles that very company and creatively insists on making ways to imagine and live life beyond labor extraction, surveillance, and ecological decline. So the image on the screen here is from Danielle Dean's many years of deep study with the archive of the Ford Motor Company, the archive that's found in Detroit, particularly that company's advertisements and its documents regarding Fordlandia. This was the failed rubber plantation that Henry Ford set up in the Amazon rainforest until rebellion by workers and also rebellion by the Amazonian ecology itself forced its demise. So Dean's watercolor landscape paintings collaged with historical Ford advertisements often feature MTurk workers or Turkers in their at-home workplaces, their laptops, on their desks, on their bedrooms, and it could as well be said to be a creative depiction of algorithmic landscapes. And they force us to question the ways in which these historical Ford advertisements and the contemporary Amazon.com labor marketplace, MTurk, sell the concealment of that which underwrites capitalism, which is the exploitation of workers and the extraction of our planetary resources, like the energy demands of data centers. Or as Dean puts it about her practice, quote, it investigates the recursive loops between circulation of ideas and the material reproduction of global capitalism, end quote. So Dean's longstanding project of interrogating colonial logics, surveillance, and labor conditions has been exhibited at Tate London, the Gallery 47 Canal in New York, and also Commonwealth and Council in LA and other sites. So Daniel Dean's creative works were not only the watercolor paintings, but also 5-channel video installations, sculpture, and live performance. So let me say a little bit about this. So over the course of around 2 years and during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, Dean conversed and collaborated with MTurk laborers through paid workshops that she conducted or convened, where they spent time looking through the Ford Motor Company archives. They discussed their own workplace experiences of isolation and when it comes to being part of this globally distributed workforce. Each worker, as Dean's co-collaborators in this project, was given a camera kit as well as props to capture their day-to-day working lives. The low-waged online click work of surveys, of data labeling, of transcription, and other tasks. So capturing selfies and images of their workspace in this way does the visual and creative work of demonstrating that their labor is not immaterial. It is a challenge to the idea that they are merely instruments of automation. So part of this co-speculation between the artists and the MTurk workers came in the form of a narrative experiment where they reenacted Fordlandia, its Fordist logics of workplace management and the deployment of colonial oversight of indigenous laborers, their health, their diet, and other matters of living, like Henry Ford wanted them to learn line dancing. Sorry, square dancing. Line dancing is what they do in Austin now. Sorry. So Dean plays the role of corporate manager, while another actor plays the role of the AI narrator who explains that Turkers do the work of, quote, trading us machines to become better at human intelligence tasks or hits. So this multi-channel work featured archival footage from Fordlandia, digital animation, Dean's own botanical sculptures, and the often unseen laborers critiquing their current working conditions, acting out revolts, smashing of time clocks, and other means of production. For the live version, a cast of actors operated as proxies for the MTurkers. So co-creating with Dean, these workers take up the idea that their creative labor is not automated, and instead with this installation, it actually, I understand it as an act of worker agency and as a commentary on how worker-led movements to creation worker-led movements can lead to the creation of more just societies or working conditions. And for me, this is especially important when we have reports of, ICE raids at an Amazon distribution center in New York City, and when the acting director of ICE earlier this month said that when it comes to deportation, quote, we need to get better at treating this like a business, like Amazon Prime, but with human beings. So it comes as no surprise that immigrant rights groups such as Mahente have focused on this particular company and on Amazon's cloud storage service for the kind of infrastructural support that it provides for the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and other agencies when it comes to sorting and sharing of data used to target immigrants. So what I've discussed here this afternoon are parts of a larger project that question how we come to see laborers rendered unseen and that tries to creatively intervene in the ways that many neighborhoods have come to be littered with doorbell cameras, with apps attached where one can report missing packages, lost pets, or their fears of the other. So art is not the only path, but for now I'm interested in attending to the analytical work and interventions made by artists and creative technologists who think through and grapple and try to undermine surveillance from predictive policing to workplace monitoring. And so this work with Dean and others, and my own archival research, interviews, and interdisciplinary analytical work investigates the ways that artists employ strategies of invention, disruption, refusal, and care when it comes to surveillance. And so I look to artists for the ways that they distill the productive possibilities of creative innovation and of imagining life beyond the surveillance state. So this isn't the entire story of anti-surveillance or refusal or of care, but it's a part that I hope, or that I insist, can help get us there. Thank you. I think we have a discussion and questions now?
Yes.
Perfect. Sure, or I can sit down.
Yeah, because apparently the voice projects.
Projection, yeah.
So thank you, Simone, for that wonderful talk. So much to learn from that. And that's like part of your upcoming book.
Sure, a legend upcoming book.
That's always the case,
Yeah.
till the book is hot off the press.
That's right.
So the floor is open for questions, comments.
Thank you so much for this, so many great ideas. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the care aspect, because what I was thinking of was, I've been very against, Ring cameras and all of this stuff, but then my 88-year-old mother moved in with me, and she lives in the floor below me on the ground floor, and, her memory is not great, and she might fall, and suddenly, and also, and Alexa, very anti-Alexa. But suddenly, these devices make themselves so useful in the absence of like a systemic approach to care, right? Like I don't have anyone else to rely on for that stuff. And so it's deeply frustrating because I ended up buying things that I thought I would never put in my home because there isn't any other way to like find out work. It's really helpful to have a camera, to have Alexa there for somebody who is, doing okay, but needs a little support. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you saw in terms of the relationship between care and surveillance in these sort of networked devices that we're sort of surrounding ourselves with.
Yeah, I mean, I had the exact same situation with my parents and having one of these, and that I was able to look for falls or other things. There was a time, I don't want to, confess too much, but there was a time when it was just my mother, and the lack of access to healthcare and long-term care when it comes to the elderly in Canada, that the government just told me, just get a Ring camera in one of those real estate boxes, because I had to go back to the States. So, so leave her in Toronto on her own with a camera. So, I mean, I'm interested in the ways that people are using ICE, using the app and the cameras to say that ICE is, within the street, or the people that have experienced, intimate partner violence are catching people on, people on camera doing that. So it's not as simple for me, at least, to say these cameras are good or bad, but maybe there's something that, thinking back to Mary Van Browne and the closed network of cameras, that we can have devices that aren't necessarily tied to Amazon or other, and these apps as well too, that might be around collective type of safety that aren't really being accumulated on on Amazon web servers or whatnot. That something could be there. So those are the questions around care, but it speaks to it's such a stopgap to have a camera when we actually need, health care and elder care and care, especially for, in these pandemic times that are quite debilitating. We have a crisis now, but a crisis in the next 10 years around questions of care. And I don't know if cameras are really about to solve it, but it is a stopgap at this moment, yeah. Thank you for that.
Kinjal.
Thank you so much for this talk. I'm thinking about how a legacy of policing has always been about protecting property. And if you make something like a closed circuit video, then that implies that the police won't have access to some of this data. That would be the goal, right? A colleague of mine now gives his Amazon account his garage code, so that the packages are now delivered directly into the garage from the worker. And so I'm thinking more about the porousness of property and sort of how the police is now then wrapped into a project of property.
Yeah.
So if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between a ring and like a homestead, or that kind of reinscription of standard ground logics or what have you, in terms of who the police protects and what technology enforces
I think you answered the question there. And I agree with you, and I hear that. And I think with both the questions, it's the side of the same kind of coin. That one is a stopgap, and one is about the accumulation and the protection of property, and who is made to be outside of it. And more it is the laborers, it's the unhoused, it's the people that are being picked up on the street by Gestapo-looking brown shirts that are pretending to be ICE. All of these kind of moments that are happening. I just don't know if there's enough moments of care of spotting your stalking ex or helping grandma or mother that allows for us to say we need to have more and more of these devices. That it's like more and more, can we have moments of privacy, of concealment? I get that. And it's from the work that me and another colleague are doing, most of the time it's not packages, it's been lost pets. That that's actually the missing part here. It's not as much as these laws are making us think, and the newspaper covering are making us think that these things are going missing. And so I think that I get that people want to protect their stuff, but I think that we have to have more rights of refusal. And maybe it's not just about, there are these, I forgot what they're called, but there are these autonomous cars that are driving around Austin now instead of Uber, so there's no driver, and they're tricked out with cameras. And I drive up next to them and with them every day. I didn't ask for that, and I have to think about just trust that this computer is going to stop or not cut me off. And I think it's about having more, as a collective, as a public, having more rights to say, like, I don't necessarily want you don't have a right to just protect and purview with a camera the whole public street, and me walking. So that's probably, but I guess maybe there might be bigger issues. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
Adele?
It's really fascinating, and I'm in great admiration of the breadth and the depth of your interpretation. As a historian, I recognize in myself a tendency to simplify things, maybe oversimplify. And I'm reminded of the history of inventions, which always have multiple impacts, both negative and positive. One example would be the invention of the telephone. In the late 19th century, there have been fascinating books written about inventions like the telephone and how people feared at the time that they would result in the breakdown of society, that people wouldn't visit anymore, that everybody would just communicate by telephone. So I think it might be interesting for you to dip a toe into the history of inventions like the automobile or the telephone, that at the time they were introduced, produced enormous apprehension and exaggerated praise for how they were going to transform even human nature, both in good ways and in bad ways.
I think there's something to be said there about looking at from the patents themselves to a history of invention and the fears around newness, whether it is the portable book or the printing press or the internet, and then what are the lessons that we can learn from that, and that maybe some things don't need to be invented, or they can lay in the patent stage. We can't stop it, yeah.
And the predictions are always a mixture of the dire and the emancipatory.
It makes me think of the ways that all of the cuts to funding that are coming through people losing NEH grants or NSF, and the ways that certain types of inventions will be stalled now because of that, or at least that's the intention, it seems, and maybe that what that present can bring for us in our future, of whether it's for medicine, healthcare, or artistic and creative work as well too. And that goes back to your question that invention is not only big business, but it's important work. Thank you, Del. Jenny?
Hi, thank you so much. I had a little bit of a follow-up question between this relationship.
Can you speak up a little, please?
Sorry, it feels like I'm yelling. I had a follow-up question between from this question between the relationship between surveillance and care, and I was really glad you talked about unseen labor because I think that plays a role in it. I mentioned to you I study doorbell camera users, and something that has come up in my interviews with them that I didn't expect is that they really bring up like this sort of tradition of like, oh, this is part of a history of sitting on the front porch. The front porch is a space for Black feminist theory. This is a space for care. It's been a space that has been very like precious and liminal, and it really like stressed to me that it is it's like a form of housework, it's a form of care work to be able to see differently. And I have asked this question of like, can we do this sort of closed circuit thing? Could we move away from these sorts of cameras? And I get really stuck because they just sort of insist that no, this is like a totally different ideology of watching. It comes from a different like legacy of labor, like you don't understand. Like I have a different approach to it. And so I wonder how you like grapple with this like very real way of watching. It's a very real different way of watching, a very real different hope of what this watching can do, with also like the very real reality of what we do know about these corporations and what we don't know about where this data goes. I don't know. I feel very like troubled. Like how to grapple with this.
Yeah, and the watching maybe that they're talking about is something done in isolation that's getting mediated, or maybe it's being shared. But to compare that with the stoop, like there's something about a collective that happens across the street, whether you're sitting on I'm talking to you, or we're having a conversation next door, and maybe there's something about those like the materiality of that sitting on the stoop or the porch, and the kinds of collaborations and care that can happen, or learning about each other, that is different from doing it on our phone away from home, or but I do recognize that this is the experience of your respondents and the people that you're in conversation with, and find a certain amount of pleasure, or that they're historicizing it in some way. And I think that we just have to, in that sense, I don't know what to make of it, but they're making something of that moment with them, and I'd be interested in how they are circulating or sharing or finding other ways to talk about their experiences of watching and being watched. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Bless you.
Thank you.
Gia.
Yes. Thank you so much for the fascinating talk. When I was listening to the mass surveillance, like the digital intervention, I just can't help but wondering kind of, what is happening in countries like China, right? The interventions sometimes function to the opposite of being emancipation, right? Technology can perfect dictatorship. So I wonder if you can share some of your thoughts on like the surveillance, not just on the corporate level, but on the state level. Like people sometimes they cannot voice their rights. Like anything that is countering even just a little bit about what the government wants, right? Kind of they're going to be basically detected and disappear the next second. So I just wonder like if you can share some of your thoughts on that.
I mean, we're seeing it right now with the ways that certain type of scripts or bots are said to be trawling social media or other sites, or even like the language that where I am in Texas that we have in our course syllabi or titles, that could then be and I think whether it's Palantir or Amazon Web Services that are how is it that people are being picked up and I don't even kidnapped, at citizenship hearings or from schools. That takes a lot of collaboration, whether it comes from, the fusion of police and immigration and other types of entities to know where people are and where they have been, and they've been use of they say, facial recognition to decide which, not just to determine which professors were the ones that were, you know, linking arms to protect their students at Columbia from arrest and other types of, you know, being held up. And so it's like that story around Black Mirror, and when you know, this is what happens over in China, but it's not happening here, quote unquote, but it is happening here. Like so it's not that we have to look to the ways that surveillance tactics are being used in spaces outside of the U.S. because they're already happening here, and we're seeing it more and more concentrated, I think, in this moment. So it's about I don't know. I want to have a hope scenario, but it is about a certain amount of a collective, our own collective rebellion to this system, but also to recognize like it's how it's operating, and to have a certain amount of subterfuge in how we communicate, how we teach, and you know what we say. Yeah, but I think these ideas have to come collectively. I just can't. It's a lot going on now.
May 1 protest.
Yes.